I think there's a question in terms of how much, for lack of a better term, slack there needs to be in the system to have some of these dimensions of life be what they can be and be what they should be. I think you can look at some of the productivity literature, some of the productivity impulses, and again, I have this stuff in myself. I'm not here throwing stones at others. And it can have this quality of just more. Can I use every minute a little bit better? Can I use every second a little bit better? Can I spend less time sleeping is one I'm always working on, and it leaves my wife completely aghast. And you will read critiques, and I think some of them are persuasive, that you get into this sort of to-do list mentality of your own life, that even as you're doing all this stuff to become more optimized and more productive, that those sort of measurable, tangible things that you're pursuing end up crowding out other things that need more space and more rest and more slack and less of a focus on optimization to grow. I'm curious if you think that critique has weight, and if there are ways then that you respond to it.
The critique has weight. I don't think it's a criticism of any position that I've taken, in the sense that I do think the cult of productivity in its many forms can be self-defeating. And the principal way in which I think it is not a charade, but a lot of hand-waving and a lot of stress, much activity, little productivity, is the focus on efficiency instead of effectiveness, meaning there is a lot of content, focus, and dozens of books certainly that are published about how to do things faster, in effect, right? So how can I cram as much as possible into every hour of my day? That's not where I focus, because it's incredibly possible. In fact, it's very prevalent to confuse busyness with being effective. So being effective is doing the right things, and then being efficient is doing things right. But if you do something unimportant well, it doesn't make it important. Does that make sense? So I actually build a lot of slack into my system. I just came back from effectively 2 weeks off of social media and computer and email. And I have at least 5 periods of 2 to 3 weeks just like that coming up. So on a macro level, you have macro and micro optimization. I spend a lot more time on the macro. So I'm looking at my entire 2017. I've blocked out these dark periods so that I can do deep work and also just enjoy what it is that I'm building in my life for myself and the people I care about. Then you have the more micro, right? The quarterly goals, the monthly, the daily. And I think it is critically important to have breathing room in the system where you are not being bombarded with inputs, which is part of the reason why I do spend a lot of my mental focus scripting the first, say, 1 to 3 hours of each day. That is important to me, and it's something that I'm constantly toying with. The boot up sequence for each day, so to speak, where I can be non-reactive and say, this is fairly typical routine for me before lunch. And this is, of course, easier to do when you're self-employed, but it's not impossible to do when you're employed, because I did it also. Before lunch, focusing on my most important to do and minimizing input, meaning text messages. So my phone is on airplane mode, email. I don't have a browser tab open, Gmail, for instance. Email is not set up on my phone at all in terms of a mail client. And in that period of time, let's just call it from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., focus on the most important to do. How do you decide on the most important to do? It's either the thing that makes you most uncomfortable. That's a pretty good proxy. Or the question I like to ask is, which one of these, if done, will make all of the rest irrelevant or easier? And if those two don't do the trick, then the third would be, which one of these, if done, would leave me satisfied with my day? Like today, I've done next to nothing today, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I just got home from Kauai, where I was with Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer, and some other people doing ice training and all sorts of craziness in something called XPT. Just got back, spent most of the day walking my dog today, and just thinking, because if I knew that if I jumped straight into the inbox, I would be immediately responding to everyone else's agenda for my time. So I know that's a bit long-winded in its answer, but the critique that productivity can veer very quickly into busyness and cramming more garbage and minutia into every minute and every hour is a very fair criticism, which is why if people ask me for recommendations on time management and so on, I don't steer them to a lot of, say, newer literature, although some of it's okay and some of it's good. I'll generally point them to something like The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. It's old. It stood the test of time. The principles are timeless. And I think that it is much more important to get the principles right in this book that is decades old than to figure out the latest and greatest app to download onto your smartphone. That's not going to make any type of difference that isn't incremental.